The Fall of Silvermoon. Far north of Gilneas, Arthas Menethil and the Scourge marched into the tranquil woodlands bordering Quel'Thalas. Much to their surprise, they met no resistance. The forests were oddly silent and deserted. It seemed as if the kingdom's high elves had fled in terror before the approaching undead, but nothing could have been further from the truth. The elves were busy preparing for the Scourge. King Anastarian Sunstrider rallied his people in action, but he left the task of organizing the defenses and leading the military to Ranger General Sylvanas Windrunner. Sylvanas came from a distinguished family of high elves. Her sisters, Alaria and Verisa, had both earned praise for bravery in battle. Sylvanas was no exception. Like her sisters, she had fought on the front lines in the Second War, when the Orcish Horde had invaded Quel'Thalas and burned its woodlands. Even before that, she had garnered a reputation as a fearless and cunning ranger while battling trolls from the nearby Amani Empire. Sylvanas ordered most of the kingdom's magi and priests to gather in Silvermoon City. They would serve as the last line of defense if the Scourge made it to the capital. But the Ranger General hoped that it would not come to that. Sylvanas took the Rangers into the woodlands outside Silvermoon City, where she planned to mount a resistance so fierce that the undead would turn back. Known as the Farstriders, the Rangers were lightly armored and highly mobile troops. Historically, they stood as the first line of defense against any intruders that threatened Quel'Thalas. It was a dangerous job, but one that carried great honor and prestige. As Arthas and the Scourge plunged deeper into the forests, Sylvanas and her rangers launched their attack from all sides. The fighting was fierce and frenzied. The undead moved steadily toward Silvermoon City, but Sylvanas made them pay dearly for every step taken. She was a brilliant tactician, and her dodge precision infuriated Arthas. The Scourge outnumbered the Rangers, and they would inevitably reach Silvermoon. Sylvanas knew that her only hope was to buy the capital's defenders time to prepare for a siege. She ordered her Rangers to make a final stand outside the city. Sylvanas herself would deal with Arthas. In full view of Silvermoon's glorious spires, the Death Knight and the Ranger General clashed. Sylvanas was fearsome, but she was fatigued from days of hard battle. Her strength faded, and Arthas found an opening. Frostmourne tore through the Ranger General and spilled the life from her veins. Death was not the end for Sylvanas Windrunner. Arthas punished the Ranger General for her defiance. He ripped the high elf spirit from her body and converted it into a spectral banshee. This act chained Sylvanas to the Lich King's will. She could not disobey him, even though she wanted to. She was forced to take part in the assault on Quel'Thalas and murder her own people, the very people she had sworn to protect to the end of her days. Sylvanas' sacrifice had been valiant, but it did not save Silvermoon. Arthas Menethil and the Scourge shattered its capital defenses and cut path north toward the Isle of Quel'Thalas, home of the Sunwell. King Anastarian Sunstrider and the surviving elves gathered aboard the fleet and retreated to the island. Protecting the Sunwell became their primary focus. They could always rebuild their capital, but the fount of arcane magic was irreplaceable. The Scourge had no ships, and the elves believed it would take time for the undead to find a way to cross the sea. They were mistaken. Arthas did not need a fleet. He had Frostmourne. When he reached the northern coast of Quel'Thalas, he dipped the rune blade into the foaming sea. The water around the weapon froze, and the ice gradually spread across the ocean until a makeshift bridge formed. As Arthas and the Scourge marched toward Quel'Thalas, King Anastarian steeled himself for battle. If the elves had any chance of surviving, it lay with him. Anastarian was elderly, but he was wise and crafty, and like Arthas, he wielded a great weapon, an ancient sword known as Fellow Melorn. The king dueled Arthas in the frozen shores of Quel'Thalas. The keening of the two blades shook the sky like thunder. Anastarian lasted much longer against Arthas than most others had, but he was no match for the Death Knight. Neither was Fellow Melorn. With one brutal strike, Arthas Menethil shattered the king's blade. His next blow ended an Astarion's life. Morale crumbled among the remaining High Elf defenders, and the scourge swept over Quel'Danas. Very few elves escaped. Victorious, Arthas reached the Sunwell and submerged Quel'Thuzad's remains in the shimmering depths. The Death Knight drew on the Found's boundless magic and wove a spell that remade the fallen necromancer into a terrifying incorporeal lich. This transformation came at a great cost to the elves. Turning Quel'Thuzad into a lich befouled the Sunwell. The Found would never be the same again. The Sunwell's corrupted energies gradually permeated Quel'Thalas and the elves who still lived there. Arthas Menethil did not linger in the kingdom. His work was done. He gathered the scourge and marched south toward Dalaran, leaving only ruins and death in his wake. The land in Quel'Thalas where he and the undead had set foot festered and died. This wound in the world will later become known as the Dead Scar, and it will remain for many years. Silvermoon City was protected by a number of magical barriers. Two were the Elf Gates, which were positioned as a strategic point on the main road to the capital. The third and most powerful barrier was called Ban Doranial. It was an impenetrable shield that derived its power from the Sunwell. Arthas Menethil and the Scourge might have never bypassed these defenses, if not for the High Elf Magister, Darkan Drathir. Darkan was a talented mage, but unbridled ambition made him arrogant and vindictive. He never felt that he received the recognition he deserved. Bitterness filled his heart and darkened his emotions. Arthas sensed Dark Khan's inner turmoil, and he saw him as a critical ally for the invasion of Quel'Thalas. The Death Knight whispered in the elf's mind and made an offer. If he served the Lich King, all the power and recognition Dark Khan craved would finally be his. Dark Khan would not resist. He betrayed his entire race and helped the Scourge destroy and bypass Quel'Thalas' magical barriers. This was the treachery of Dark Khan. The flight to Kalimdor. With the Scourge approaching Dalaran, Archmage Antonidas and the Kirin Tor readied themselves for battle. They evacuated most of the city's civilians, leaving behind only a small resistance force. Though these defenders were few, they were some of the greatest magi in the world. Not only that, but Dalaran itself was a weapon. Magic coursed through the streets, and arcane barriers blanketed the city. Many of these wards would destroy any undead that touched them. Despite these preparations, a sense of impending doom fell over Dalaran. The Scourge had brought Lordaeron to its knees. They had ripped out the heart of Quel'Thalas. These two nations were perhaps the mightiest in the Eastern Kingdoms, perhaps the mightiest in the entire world. If they had fallen so easily, what hope did Dalaran have? This question plagued Antonidas. His thoughts turned to the hooded figure who had urged him to flee from the Eastern Kingdoms. Antonidas now realized that this stranger was no madman. He had been right all along. It was too late for Antonidas to go west. As the Kirin Tor's leader, he would not abandon Dalaran. Protecting the city and its vaults of Arcana was his duty. However, there was someone who could act on the stranger's advice and save innocent lives. Jaina Proudmoore. The sorceress was initially hesitant to leave. She wanted to stay by Antonidas' side and defend Dalaran. She also wanted to see what had become of Arthas. Jaina sensed the Death Knight among the approaching Scourge. She still wrestled with guilt about abandoning him in Stratholme, and she wondered if there was some way to save him. It was only after much debate that Jaina relented. She understood, just as Antonidas did, that the city could not hold out against the Scourge. If she and the Archmage died, who would be left to heed the stranger's warning? The master and the apprentice parted ways. Though neither of them said it, they both knew that this was the last time they would ever see each other. In the days to come, Jaina worked tirelessly to rally as many refugees as she could. Not everyone she met agreed to go with her, but many did. When she finally set sail for Kalimdor, her force included members of nearly every alliance race. Some were survivors from Lordaeron and Quel'Thalas. Some were dwarves and gnomes from the Alliance military, and some were humans from Stormguard, Kul Tiras, and other nations in the region. Though they came from different places, they followed Jaina Proudmoore for the same reason. She represented something that had almost entirely vanished from the Eastern Kingdoms. She represented hope.